Is there a vacuum?
Helicopters? No, it's police helicopters, and this is a really weird feeling. I've never had this before, so now we're up on 58 floors. I am looking down at the police helicopter as it goes by.
That's how high Brent is up. That's crazy.
Nice.
You still have to have a housewarming party.
Yes, we do. As soon as when we get back from Mexico, yes.
I'm going to be in Mexico next week.
As you are, 2 weeks from now. The other thing I forgot to ask Erica was, because as soon as I told Erica, oh, we're going to go meet up with them in Tulum, I said we take them to our favorite dive bar taco places, like middle of nowhere, hole in the wall. And she's like, Andrew and Jessica are not dive bar people. They want to go to them. I was like, oh, I should probably ask that. Yeah.
That's not true, actually. Andrew loves dive bars. He actually prefers dive bars. So.
Notice that it was Andrew loves dive bars.
Not we.
No, I do too. So I would rather do that than go on TripAdvisor and be like, oh, this restaurant sounds good, because we usually do last minute stuff. So that sounds a lot better to me than.
Oh. Yeah, no. So we have two places. One right on the ocean. That's one guy who just bought a whole bunch of land initially, like 50 years ago, and so he has this open air folding tables seafood restaurant, and it's amazing. And you order your stuff and you walk out in the water and hang out, and then he's got hammocks and all kinds of stuff set up. That one's my favorite.
Oh, that sounds miserable. Can't wait.
Yes.
And here come the technical questions.
And the technical questions are coming in.
Oh my goodness.
Let's see. Angie, do you have a light? Andy's asking why you're sitting in the dark.
There is light. This is Portland, Oregon, people. It's not very bright here. Extra light on the way.
Fair. All right, so let's dive in. We have a question from Arlie. Let's see here. I had the need to write select which return both scalar and aggregate columns in each row. This makes me group by, which is fine. But I also have to pull all the scalar columns in the group by clause. There has to be a better way, isn't there? From Arlie DB.
There is indeed. Use a windowing function if you're on 2012 or later. That is perfect for this sort of thing because you do get the detail in the aggregates side by side. You don't have to do a group by on the columns that you don't want to group by. So it's a perfect fit for what you're describing, and it's really, really easy to learn too. Once you get the hang of windowing function syntax, you're off and running.
There you go.
And he says that from experience because he has a training video on this topic.
Yeah, I spend a good 25 minutes talking about window functions. So if you are interested in video training for that, my T-SQL Level Up course has that.
That course is very entertaining too. I watched it and I just sat with popcorn and laughed my ass off. And I know nothing about SQL Server.
The first time I saw it, I was like, I dragged Erica into the office. I'm like, come here, you got to see this. This is amazing.
Bring your spouse.
Yes.
Let's see. Question from James Anderson. For SQL 2012 availability groups, how do I find why the AG moves from one node to another? The server hosting the AG did not reboot.
So if you lose network connectivity on a node for 1 millisecond, it will fail. That particular node will fail over. So if the primary loses network connectivity for 1 millisecond, you're going to get a failover. If you have a secondary that happens to own cluster quorum and it loses for 1 millisecond, you can get a failover. So if you search on our site, if you go to brentozar.com/go/alwaysOn, we've got all kinds of resources and posts in order to make that easier. A good example of it is Microsoft has a set of guidelines for implementing always-on availability groups in Azure. Those same best practices are useful for you on-premises because they assume that Azure is going to have an unreliable network. It sounds like you may have an unreliable network as well. I can't guarantee that's the cause. 99% of the time when I look at them, that's the cause.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Thomas Strike. If you wanted to audit for any person or any app connecting as SA, would you use an instance level trigger, SQL audit, or some third-party program?
Ooh. It depends on who's doing the auditing. is this something you're doing for like a corporate governance policy where the auditors can actually get people fired, like they mean something and there's lawyers and insurance kinds of things involved? Or are you just trying to check a box to make your manager happy? If you're just trying to check a box, go get IDERA Compliance Manager. IDERA Compliance Manager works by running traces. It is invasive, but this auditing just kind of costs money. It's like $1,000 to $2,000, and it's going to get the job done, but you can bypass it anytime you want, you being the database administrator. So this just kind of makes people feel good. If you've got auditors with teeth and they want to make sure that not even the DBA can bypass these audits, then you go buy an Imperva or Guardium appliance. Imperva or Guardium. These are like 6 figures when you get the whole thing totally installed. You need redundancy. It needs to be over in DR as well. But the DBA, when set up properly, will not be able to bypass them. That's what auditors really want. They want to log everything that happens regardless of who's doing it. If you're just doing it because you're curious and you want to know who's logging in as SA, that's a real tough one. I would probably use login triggers, but I would honestly just change the password.
That seems simple enough. Change the password. Let's see, question from, I'm going to butcher this, Sudharka. Brent, could you please let us know what is the best value for fill factor?
No, but I will let Doug, whichever side Doug is on.
Other side. Look towards the window. Yeah, so I would start with a fill factor of 100. Just go with like what should be the default anyway, and work your way down from there. What we found is that fragmentation is often not worth the trouble that you incur when you lower your fill factor. You know, test it out, see if 90, 80 works better for you. But chances are 100 will be just fine. You know, you'll have to test it out depending on what kind of workload you're seeing, whether or not you get like, you know, non-sequential GUIDs as your clustered index, and inserts get all over the place, things like that. But yeah, start with 100, and just unless you can prove that a lower number is better, stick with it, because fragmentation isn't your worst problem.
Mm-hmm.
Body odor is.
What is your worst problem? A question from Dennis. My client has a 4-proc server, 64 GM RAM, and does not want to use parallelism. Huge data I/O up to terabytes. Any reason not to turn on? Prior DBA failed miserably.
If it's vendor apps?
Parallelism.
Yeah, vendor apps. If you got like a vendor app that's SharePoint or some flavors of Dynamics, some of them will tell you don't turn on parallelism. You want everything with backstop of 1. What I would do is there's 2 settings. Cost threshold for parallelism is how big the queries need to be before they go parallel, and then max stop is how far they go parallel. To learn more about that, head over to brentozar.com/go/cxpacket. CXPacket. At brentozar.com/go/cxpacket, we explain what those 2 things mean, cost threshold for parallelism and max stop. In your position, what I would do is set cost threshold really high so that small queries don't go parallel. Most end users won't notice a difference as you start to introduce parallelism. But just make sure that this is your biggest problem before you go and change that, because anytime you change things, you run the risk of making people angry.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, what about Azure databases? Are there any gotchas for Azure databases aside from the unsupported features of Azure DB that you can share with us, or do you have a post on Azure DB where you've talked about these gotchas?
I passionately love Azure SQL DB today. I didn't 6 months ago. It was kind of a joke. 6 months ago, it sucked in terms of performance. It didn't have a lot of features. It's just kind of hit or miss. Today, it's amazing. It's really powerful, has all kinds of really cool features. The way that I would just start is go deploy your app to it. Go deploy your app and see if it works, because there's still a lot of things that Azure SQL DB doesn't support. Agent jobs is the classic example. Cross-database queries is another. If your app works in it, then the next thing that you have to know is it's like Hotel California. You check in and you do not check out. Whenever you put your data up into there, you can't just get a backup and then restore that backup down on premises. The way to get data in and out of Azure SQL DB is to write it out via select statements or BCP or SSIS type things. So it's when you decide to make the plunge, you better really like Azure SQL DB because it's going to be a pain in the rear to jump back out again. Doug, remind me, inside joke, can you restore a database backup from Azure SQL DB?
Absolutely not.
All right.
Do we have any posts about that?
You know, we don't. It just keeps changing so fast, and I keep meaning to go, oh, I should, write a post about it. One of these days I need to get around to it. Part of me doesn't want to be famous for it because it's hard to work on with what we do. But
yeah, I tried to set up an Azure lab right when I started here about 2 years ago. Oh, actually, you know what? Today's a woo.
No.
Get
out of here!
December 9th. So, yeah, right when I started, I tried to set up an Azure lab, and it was so bad. We had trouble just getting the Developer Edition ISO into the lab to install SQL Server. It has gotten substantially better since then. So, yeah, it's come a long way as far as like whether or not we'd even, consider working with it. Like I actually don't.
I could say the same thing about you, Doug. I could say the same.
I was a miserable wretch when I started.
That's 2 years ago.
Yep.
All right. Curtis has a question about indexed views. If indexed views are like a materialized table, where does a table get created? Can you specify location for the materialized table? What happens when your index view reads data from tables in a different file group?
Well, it's just like an index. So when you create it, you say create index on, and then you can say whatever file group it is. You can put it on any different file group that you want in the database. It's just like you can have a table with indexes scattered across five file groups if you want. That's totally okay. There's the query optimizer, there's the query processor, and there's the storage engine. The storage engine is involved with figuring out where stuff lives on disk and how to retrieve it, but it doesn't affect your query plans at all.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, Chris Woods has a question on backups, looks like. We got a backup from a client that is 2014, and we only have, SQL 2012 servers. Is there any way, other than scripting out all the objects and data, to get this database online for our 2012 environment?
No. Sadly, no. So what you can do, one crazy oddball way to do it is to get an evaluation edition. You can go download SQL Server Evaluation Edition. It's good for 180 days. So you could go grab the client's backup from there, or to restore the client's backup on there and query it. But unfortunately, now you can't get the data out and downgrade it to an earlier version of SQL Server without doing the stupid select all the data back out trick.
It's a question from Andy. He has lots of servers, lots of old servers and databases. What's the best way on checking to see if they are still in use, other than disabling them and waiting for a phone call?
Ooh. Any of you guys have thoughts on this one? So I got a bad idea. Well, there's two parts. Let's throw it into two parts. How do we know if someone's selecting out of there, and how do we know if someone's changing data in it? The changing data part's actually really easy. You check and see if there's transactions being logged. Turn off stuff like index rebuilds and defrags in there, and if the transaction logs are of any size, then people are still inserting, updating, deleting into the database. Selects, that's a really tough one. You could spelunk through the plan cache, but it's going to be kind of hard. And if it's a heavily loaded server, the plans may not stick around. You guys got any thoughts?
I don't know where it came from, but there was a script that we used at my last place that supposedly counted last reads and last writes, and somebody mentioned that there's this post on Stack Overflow that's got a copy-paste script, so maybe Stack Overflow's got some lifelines out there.
Yeah, I bet they were looking at index utilization DMVs. The index DMVs would tell you, how many seeks or scans it had. Now, of course, the gotcha is there has to be Those get reset whenever your indexes are rebuilt on 2012 or newer. I love that, though. Go look at the index usage DMVs and see if the user query counts are going up. Just make sure you also disable stuff like agent jobs that are rebuilding indexes, because I don't want to screw with that on these kinds of servers.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, a question from Larry. Either Doug or one of you in an earlier office hours has mentioned that high-density core servers are essentially crap. Can you expound? Can you elaborate?
I don't think that was me that said that.
Typically, it's the more core count that you have, the slower the processor goes. So 4-core processors are the highest, then 6-core, 8-core, 10-core, 12-core, 18-core. So if you have single-threaded queries or queries that can only go out to a certain number of threads, they're going to be dramatically slower as you add more cores. And then, of course, there's licensing, because you have to license every core in SQL Server. Enterprise Edition at $7,000 a core, just licensing one core will cost more than the processor. So I really don't want to screw up and get more cores than I actually need.
There was an index corruption issue with SQL 2012?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and 2014 as well, yeah.
Wow. Is it fixed in the new one, in the new versions?
I don't remember which service pack and cumulative update it was, but the fixes are out there. If you want to see the current version, you can go to SQLServerUpdates.com, and we've got the links to the most recent SP. Yeah,
I think the 2012 one was fixed in like Service Pack 2 and then a cumulative update that followed that. I think you have to be like between Service Packs 2 and 3 or something like that for 2012.
Mm-hmm. So what do we know about, what is this, REFS file systems? Are there any pointers we can offer around using them?
There's some kind of deal. This is a new file system for Windows, and I can't remember if it came out in Windows 2012 R2 or what it was. There's some kind of deal when it initially came out that it didn't support DBCC CheckDB's sparse files, and I don't have a handle on what the current situation is with that, where the support level is. I just haven't seen anybody saying, oh, REFS would solve problems for us if we could get onto that over NTFS. So just make sure you read up about DBCC CheckDB and that keyword REFS. That should give you pointers towards when it's actually supported.
Mm-hmm. Brent, you keep up on that, on the SQL Server updates?
I'm the guy who watches all RSS feeds and gets really excited whenever new hotfixes come out. I'm that geek. I never thought I would be. I love reading bug reports because it's just a laugh to see some of these bug reports, well, under these rare circumstances, and then you just start laughing because you can, I'm like, oh, I can see how I wouldn't have caught that either as a developer. That makes sense to me. That's fun to read.
Gotcha. Let's see, a question on SQL Server 2008 R2 from Ted. What's the best way to handle growing log files when the recovery mode is set to simple?
Generally, I look at how big the log file is in relation to the data file size. I'm kind of okay with going up to, say, 25% of the size of the database. If we're worried about it growing past 25% of the size of the database, like if you have a 100 gig database and a 50 gig log file, you can start looking at SP who is active, and it'll show you the longest running transactions. Maybe somebody's doing a begin tran and not closing it. It can also be things like replication or backups. That's not going to be backups not being taken. But do this. Select star from sys databases. Select star from sys.databases. And the very last column is going to be log reuse weight description. That'll tell you why the log isn't being cleared out, and that can be your key on where to keep troubleshooting.
Yeah. Another place I've seen that happen is in staging databases where you've got a lot of ETL going through, and your log file will grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And it's because it's a staging database, you don't really care about backing up what's in there. In fact, you probably don't want to. So it could be that that log is just growing unchecked because you've got a staging database that you don't care about backing up, and nothing is keeping it under control.
They're doing huge 100 gig table loads in and out, massive updates.
Which can still be done in production databases too.
Yes. Whoopsie. Hard way.
Yeah.
A question from Ryan on settings and configurations. This seems like he's recently discovered that Windows Server 2012 has a scheduled defrag that by default is disabled and uses the switch to defrag all volumes. Would you recommend changing the job to only defrag the OS drive or disabling the task entirely?
In theory, people will tell you, oh, it's never going to fire off because the SQL Server has the files locked, so you don't have to worry about it grabbing the files. Well, except for that rare case where you're stopping the SQL Server service to do some kind of patching and the defrag kicks off and grabs the files while SQL Server is not active. So me personally, I'm just a big fan of only defragging the OS drive. I'm really not even a fan of defragging the OS at all either. Who really cares how unfragmented the OS drive is? But this is one of those things where I pick battles with sysadmins, and I'll just say, if you insist on keeping the defrag on, just know someday you're going to go to start the SQL service and it won't start. Go check to see if the defrag job is running, kill it, and then start SQL Server. But as long as you know that, I'm cool with it.
All right, we got a question on availability groups. Don would like to execute an agent job on the failover of an availability group. He's tried to create an alert for error number 1480 and setting the response to trigger the agent job. This does work, but during a failover it triggers multiple 1480 alerts, in turn triggering the job 4 times. Is there a better way to identify a failover fire off an agent job just once? I have one AG set up and a 2-node FCI cluster config.
I have one crispy burrito that says, I bet you're trying to send an email whenever a fire alert, whenever a failover happens. What you want instead is monitoring software. Monitoring software can do that kind of alerting for you. You can have the tasks fail whenever the failover happens, or tasks alert whenever the failover happens. Because +2, what you also want is you want alerts on when the AG gets far behind, when the listener stops working, when read-only queries stop getting distributed, all that stuff. Monitoring tools are $1,000 to $2,000 a server, and they're going to work. They're going to work way better than the crappy code you and I are going to write.
Let's see. Someone, our business has decided to distribute SSMS as an end-user tool. How can I stop the creation of the number of temp tables? Our record is at our record table is at 896 gigabytes.
Oh, wow, that's an awesome question. That's so cool.
So would denying them create permission be enough, Brent? What do you think?
Oh, but you want them to be able to create, I bet. You just want it capped at a certain size, something ridiculous like that.
Views, maybe?
I'm thinking, I'm going to go all duct tape. We should each give answers, and mine will be total duct tape. I'm going to run a query like SP_WHOISACTIVE in a loop. SP_WHOISACTIVE has tempDB allocations as one of the columns. And anytime I see tempDB allocations over, say, 10 gigs, I'm going to kill that session and send an email to somebody. It's so bad. I know it's bad, but yeah, that's me, duct taping.
Okay, so what if you could deny temp table, and this is got to be horrible performance-wise, but what if you could deny temp table creation that wouldn't preclude table variable creation?
But they could still make it a gazillion terabytes in size, though.
Yeah, but yeah, there just isn't a really even halfway reasonable solution for this.
I thought you were going to go somewhere else. I thought you were going to say a trigger that anytime you inserted into tempDB tables, it would check the number of rows, and beyond a certain number of rows, it would reject and roll back. I love this. That's a lot. Okay, so that's a really good example of what you should post on Stack Exchange. Go to dba.stackexchange.com. People will love it because it's an awesome. You saw how we all laughed. We thought it's just a great question to read, and you'll get great answers back on there. And I want to see what people's answers are because I think it's going to be hilarious.
I'd be curious if resource governor would factor into that too.
Yeah, how does that?
Give everyone their own tiny resource governor pool.
Oh, you could at least throttle their query, like if the cost is more than this, don't execute too. There's some tricks you can do with that. Ooh.
All sorts of ways to make people unhappy in this scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sean says put the temp tables on a small drive.
Well, yeah, that's cheating. That's you could just fix the tempdb size, but then one user can run tempdb out of space and cause you problems. Well, if you want it to coexist, you just want one user not to kill the server. Oh, this is so cool.
Let's see. If an application is using ODBC to connect to SQL Server 2012, always on, how do I set read-only connections in ODBC?
ConnectionStrings.com has examples of all the connection strings that are out there. They have stuff around how you set up database mirroring, multi-step not failover is true, all that stuff. So go to ConnectionStrings.com, click on the SQL Server section, and then they've got examples in there for always-on availability groups.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Tracy has a query that runs great in SQL 2008 and miserable in SQL 2014. She read online about cardinality estimator, and that may be the issue. Are there any ideas here? Exact same query other than the SQL versions.
Compare the plan. So get the two plans, the two execution plans, the actual plans for both, put them up on two monitors and start looking at the differences. Go to the top right first and work your way down. Now, it's not going to be obvious on the screen why SQL Server chose, one plan over the other, but it'll give you a quick example of how dramatically different they are. Then, on the 2014 box, throw it into the old cardinality estimator, either using a trace flag or using the database options, and run the query again. And then you can add a third thing into the mix to see, does the old cardinality estimator still produce the query plan that the 2008 one did? The great article that's going to start your journey, and I give this link out at least once a day, is Slow in the Application, Fast in SSMS. Slow in the Application, Fast in SSMS by a genius out of Europe, Erland Sommerskog. It is like 40 pages long, but it helps guide your journey through how you troubleshoot differences in execution plans and why they're different. It may not get you the root cause, but it's just going to help you going down through that journey.
Summer smog. Where are we from?
Norway or Sweden or
Sweden or
Denmark?
Maybe Denmark. I'm not sure.
Oh, that's a creative one.
And he uses the hot dog theme on Windows, so like everything's bright colors and Comic Sans font and so on.
Awesome. Like our April Fool's website.
Exactly. Yes. He was one of the inspirations.
Let's see. Dave has a scenario for us. Say if you have several tables with about 100 million rows in a publication, and you were deleting about 50 million rows from each in 100 batches, would you drop the publication and re-snapshot the data, or let replication publish all the deletes?
Dear God. I hope you're only doing this once. If you're only doing this once, depending on the kind of replication, you could actually stop replication, execute the deletes on each server, and then restart up replication so that way those deletes don't get sent around. But man, if you're doing this on a regular basis, this is where I'd use something like partition views, and I'd have different tables, one table for each of the groups of things that I need to delete, so that way I can just truncate the table by itself instead of trying to delete portions of a big ginormous table. But that's a tough one. If it's assuming it's a one-time, stop transactional, or assuming it's, oh God, post it on Stack Exchange. So I'm going to say stop replication and execute the deletes, but yeah, ooh, that's tough. Oh, Dave says transactional replication one time only. Yeah. So okay, so in that case, look into stopping transactional replication, perform the deletes on each machine so they're not logged, and then start transactional replication back up again. I am oversimplifying the bejesus of this. I am only repeating something that I've heard replication experts say. So just to make it crystal clear, this is not something that I do on any kind of regular basis.
I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Just to make that crystal clear. Let's take one more. This one is from Donald. I tried using index views for the first time and was thrilled with the results, but over the following weekend my batch jobs failed until I updated my script specifying quoted identifier to on. What else do I need to be concerned about? Did I do something wrong?
I can't remember if we have a blog post about this or not.
I know we have blog posts on index views. I don't know if it addresses anything like that in particular, though.
Limitations. If you go into Books Online, it's cheesy for me to say that, but if you go into Books Online and you search for the filtered indexes page or the index views page, there's a restrictions link and it tells you what all the restrictions are. There's something around ANSI nulls, quoted identifiers, lots of different restrictions on your session, and you want to read through those and follow those. You only have to set it up once. You have to do it for every application that's connecting. Make sure their session options are right. That is the big one by far.
Mm-hmm.
There's also, I should also say, there's corruption issues around index views, and I don't remember which service packs or cumulative updates they've been fixed in. If you want to search for index view corruption, because if I vaguely remember right, one of them involves the merge statement, which is it's another reason to stay current on service packs and cumulative updates.
Cool beans. All right, Brent, you won't be here next week, right?
No, it'll be just you guys. I will be drinking margaritas on the sea on the shore in Mexico. And then, too, also for everybody, the week after, we are not having office hours. So we have it on the 16th. We are not having it on the 23rd because we're all going to be drinking margaritas in various places. And then we will see you guys back after the next week, after on the 30th as well. So.
Mm-hmm. All right, bye guys.
Bye.
Catch the helicopter. Yeah, there he goes.
Nice.
I'm gonna go watch the helicopter run around.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
All right, see you later.